Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this Spotlight webinar, Control Plan in 2 minutes or less. I am Lisa Sterling, your host and moderator for today's session. Before we get started, I would like to mention just a couple of housekeeping items. We invite you to ask questions throughout the presentation by typing in your Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen, as your phone is muted during the session. We will address the questions received at the end of the presentation. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and will be available in a few days for playback. I would now like to introduce you to our presenter, Tim Hogan, Vice President of Business Development for HiQA. And with that, I will turn the floor over to Tim.
Thank you very much, Lisa, and thank you everyone for joining us. Greatly appreciate it. At HiQA, we really have a mission to help people streamline their processes, no matter where they are in their quality journey, let's call it. Whether it's a two-person job shop starting out, whether it's an OEM corporation looking to streamline supplier information, we capture all that information and help those organizations become more efficient, more effective in whatever their process currently is. We do have over 1,200 customers globally, so we are very excited about that. And it keeps growing actually quite at a rapid rate. This slide isn't meant to brag at all, just to let you know that we do touch many different industries on many different levels, right? Aerospace, medical, automotive. We're very familiar with the new AS 13100, the 1645, or 13485. Even 9000, even ISO 9001. So a lot of those different requirements are being integrated into the HiQA solution, so we can help automate that as well. All right, so let's get into the software. And this isn't meant for a PowerPoint presentation. This is really meant for how do we do it? How do we get under the hood and really look at this? So that's what this is designed for, and then what the Spotlight webinar is all about. So let's do that. Let's hop right into the software and get right to it. So a lot of times, if you haven't seen HiQA before, we specialize in a few different aspects of the software, from ballooning to inspection plan creation to automating the submission information and documentation. So we try to streamline that entire process for you, okay, and help it. Now, we are a database-driven solution, so everything that we do is in a database and available for you immediately, okay, in real time, whether it's statistics, real-time statistics, real-time inspection plan creation. You can have multiple people logged in and working on the same project at the same time. We handle all of that information for you. Okay, so how do we start this process usually? We usually start with either by drawing or by wizard. In this case, we're going to start by wizard because we're going to apply some templates and defaults to the system. That's really going to help streamline a lot of different documentation, including our control plan, okay? And we do that and list it by what we call part category. So inside the part category, and by the way, you can have part category be customer specific maybe, or even part type specific if you're always doing housings. Oh, great. It's usually the same process, right? So let's use that same process as a default for all of our new ones. No problem. In this case, we're going to grab our fictitious company vacuuming tool and just say complete here. And we're going to apply some the defaults that were set up for that part category. And I'm going to show you the part category later on so you can kind of get a better idea of what I'm talking about and how you can apply different defaults and different settings for that, okay? All right, so we start with a 2D print, and typically we're just going to hit auto balloon and hit okay. What happens is we developed our own OCR, optical character recognition, to where we're analyzing the print and disseminating it out. But what you'll find is we have a pretty advanced technology to where we're going to look at the GD&T and automatically grab it. So a lot of other products out there, you have to manually select it and then apply or manually populate it. We actually bypassed that step to where, well, you can see that took 20, 25 seconds, something like that. You can see that we've already ballooned the print, identified all the characteristics, But more importantly, if we look down here, this is a table in the database. So we've already extracted that information and populated it into the database. All right. So from the dimension number to the drawing zone, dimension type, and that's going to be important here in just a couple minutes. The requirement, nominals, tolerances, all of that information has already been extracted and populated into the database. You're looking at a window in the database. It's what we call our bill of characteristics. You can see it labeled right there. So now we'll start talking about how we can streamline the control plan information, right? Because this is really how do I say this? The best way to say it is, let's separate the idea of a control plan and inspection plan. Because a lot of companies, those are basically the same thing. Those are synonyms. And although they share a lot of the same information, they can be different. So what we're doing is we're building the inspection plan of how we're going to check this part. And then eventually we'll get the data in as well. That's not for today, but it's a function of the software to be able to utilize different tools to be able to capture that information, like from a CMM or manually from a shop floor, from like a caliper, mic, something like that. However, this information will also automatically be transferred to our control plan. So how does that look and how does it work? Let's start talking about it. So we had a rule set up in the system that said for Acme Tool, for our company of Acme Tool, set it up for 1/20 as the sampling rate. Okay, so now our sampling rate is automatically generated from the defaults that we had. Similarly, we had a gauge category set up to where it looks at the type, and depending on the type of dimension it is, will automatically populate the gauge category. Let's take a look at what that actually looks like in the settings, okay? So if we go up in our settings, we're going to look at our part category. Okay. And again, this is more like a look under the hood. Our spotlight webinars are meant to be a little more specific. Okay. So here we can set up the system to where we can have custom categories for customer and part. We already talked about that. So let's look at that Acme Tool, for example. If we look at Acme Tool, these are the different unique settings that can be set up for default. All right. We can have like part settings. What decimal table do we want to use? Do we have a specific, customer decimal table that's used? Do we want specific colors or shapes to be defaulted to the system? If you notice, it was a purple color on the balloon. That's simply because we had purple here. So even something as simple or even silly as having different colors for different customers. However, when we start talking about the, let's call it more advanced levels, and we get into the control plan information, we look at our AQL settings, and this is our sampling rate, okay? So we set up a default sampling rate that said 1/20, right? That's because that's what was listed right here. You can set up whatever default sampling rate that you like, and it will default to that. And then, of course, you can always change that later, and I'll show you how that works in just a couple minutes here. But also for pass-fail dimensions, you can set those up differently. Maybe for a thread gauge or a snap gauge or some type of attribute, you can set those up for different default pass-fail frequencies. Also, notice that this is checked as well, and I'm going to come back to that in just a minute because we're going to change some things on the print, and you'll notice that it's going to auto-sync with it. Now, as far as our submission documentation is concerned, it's what we call PQP, which in High QA's language stands for Production Quality Planning. Okay, because we're really focused on the production and the data and the manufacturing side of the quality world and not just like document control. Okay, so in our PQP, we have it set up for Acme Tool to have a level 4 PPAP as the index. Now, that's the default. You could always have any type of index that you wanted. And an index is the list of documentation needed for submission. Do I have a level 1, which has, well, I'll show that to you later. It may have like 3 components, but a level 3 has, all 18 or actually 15 elements as in it. We'll talk about workflows a little bit when we get to developing the control plan. And then in this case, we have it set up to where it's going to automatically generate a process flow diagram. If you would like, you could also set it up to automatically generate different documentation instances as well, but I wanted to build it for you so you could see it being built. And we're going to auto-populate that. So that's kind of a peek behind the window as in the part category. Now, for the default gauge category, as I mentioned to you before, we have it set up to where if it's any type of GD&T, automatically populate to a CMM. Now, this is unique to my system. You can set it up however you want on your system, completely configurable. Okay. For example, linears are set to caliper, threads are set to thread gauge, things of that nature. So this is just meant, if you've ever heard of the 80-20 rule, this is meant to capture about 80% of the defaults. There's for the default settings to capture about 80% accuracy. And then you always have that 20% that you need to capture yourself or change, or that's unique to that specific part. So let's go back. Okay, that's kind of a peek behind under the hood, if you will. So now let's go over back to our part. Okay, and then we'll go into our drawings. And let's scroll that back down so you can see it a little bit better. Whoa, that's pretty tricky. There we go. All right. So we have our print, we have it fully ballooned, but we can capture more information directly from it using the tools in the software that will auto-populate our control plan when we get to that step. For example, we can extract title block text. And if we look right over here in the part properties, we can see that this is just the default of what the file name was, okay, which is obviously not what we want. So we could say, well, this is actually the part name, and we can see the part name update over here. So this is done automatically when we box select it using our OCR technology that we use to gather all of the dimensions off the print, right? There's our part number, even our rev, we can update our rev to say this is rev, you'll see A and it'll switch to B. So we can capture information from it. Now, if notes is important to us for it to be automatically put on our control plan, we can also dimension notes. It's our little text icon right up here, and it's a toggle, so we just need to click it once. And then we box select whatever notes we want. If we have notes on here, well, I don't have decent notes, so I apologize for that. But if we box select that, box select this, as many as you want, and as you note it, or if you notice or not, when we're done selecting it, what's happening is that it's automatically figuring out what the note states and puts it over here in our kind of like the details about the note, but also puts it in our bill of characteristics as a requirement. So notes it will also treat as a pass-fail in the system. So when we go to acquire data, it will have it in the system as a pass-fail. So it is a requirement against it. Okay. So control plan information, I'm going to skip a lot of things that I normally skip because we're just focused on the control plan for today. Okay, but we are going to roll into manufacturing operations because that's a key component of building that control plan. All right, so in the manufacturing operations, what's going to happen is we're going to break some of these dimensions out into specific operations because that's going to help separate our data on the control plan itself, right? So we'll select, we'll get a few operations in here. Let's select a few of these dimensions, few of the overall dimensions here. And let's just say we're going to build an operation. We're going to do that right here. All I did was hold down control and selected specific dimensions. We can say add operation. And now we can see that. Let me change this color so maybe you can see it a little bit better. Yeah, there you go. So now we can see those a little bit better. But now that we have the op10 listed here, we can add additional information into it as well. We could say, oh, this is a roughing operation, for example. So maybe we would want to label it as roughing. And you can add additional information here. Like maybe this is in the milling group, or you can even have your specific machines in here. However, we need to tie it to a process. So as a lot of people on the call probably know, we tie a lot of information from a process into a manufacturing operation. Okay, now what that means is the documentation that's behind the scenes for the process is templatized and put in what we call a library or process library. So now all we need to do is define the process, right? Like this process, and we're assigning it, if you will, to this operation. This is going to help automatically generate our documentation later on, including our control plan. So we'll just say, okay, and now we have these specific dimensions for our roughing up and assigned to our roughing process. Now, just for the sake of making it look better later on, I'm going to add a few more operations here, just to, again, make our documentation look a little more populated. Let's say we're going to grab those and grab those. I'm just adding some random dimensions into the samples. And now I'm going to go and I'll just label them. Let's say we're going to drill. We'll have this as a drilling operation. Sign okay. And really the main component that you want to capture here, or at least understand here, is that we're identifying operations and that we're identifying a process associated with the operation. The rest of the information isn't necessary, but it would just help more populate the documentation. Let's see. Ooh, finish. Let's say we're going to finish turn that. We'll assign it to our turning. And again, you could have, hey, this is in our turning group, great. Whatever information you want to put there. So now we have all of our operations identified, and then we associated a process with those operations. Okay, so now, but we can change things within that operation. If we look down here in our bill of characteristics, we can see the manufacturing operations here. If I look in the pull down here, we can see our operations listed. And if I just looked at that roughing operation, for example, now I have a print specific for my roughing operation. Okay, and if it is a truly roughing operation, you'd want to probably leave some material on for finish, right? So what we can also do is, or what we do is we provide you some tools to be able to update these dimensions specific for this operation. All right, and here's our nominal. Maybe we want to leave on some material. Let's say we want to add 20 to it. You can add, subtract, go by percentage if you'd like to. Let's say you want to add 20 thousandths to it. Let's say you want to put a plus 50 minus 40 for a set tolerance. You could change maybe a gauge category. Maybe I want to measure this with a contracer out on the floor. Obviously you wouldn't, but maybe you want to just change the gauge category just for this operation. Maybe you could even change the sampling rate for this specific operation, different from the other operations and different from the finish. Let's say this is really important and you want to measure it at 100%, right? Just for this operation. And again, you could change the acceptance rate. You could even monitor SPC just on this operation by clicking this button, okay? So ultimately, when we hit apply and close here, you'll see that we have the requirement and the nominals have been updated and changed by that 20 thousandths. We're at plus 50 minus 40. Our sampling rate set at 100% and our gauge category is set to contracer. Okay, now that will streamline things when we go to acquire data. If we were to go to acquire data, again, we're not going to do that today, but it would streamline that process. But this information will also be automatically transferred to our control plan. So as we do it here, instead of if you build it, they will come. It's like if you build it into here, we can automatically generate the control plan. So let's talk about that and let's start doing those functions. Okay, let's go into our PQP records. Sorry, the pull down for Zoom is right here, and I'm trying to get it to go up so it's easier to see, but I can't seem to do that. So at any rate, so let's get into the build a job. So we have to build a job so we can assign the information and the documents to the job itself. So we very simply do that. It's just basic information. I need a quantity really is all we need. But also note it says auto default PQP documents. So before, when you saw us in the Acme tool part category, you saw that it defaulted to a specific index, which was a list of submission requirements. This is that index. These were the submission requirements for the level 4 PPAP for Acme tool. And one of those components we told it to automatically generate a process flow diagram, right? Well, in this case, here's that process flow diagram. Now we're going into the process flow because we need the process flow in high QA to help set up the control plan, all right? So let's look at this. Now, this is where we really get some exposure as to how things tie together. In the manufacturing operations, which we just developed and had in there or put in the system, that information was automatically generating our process flow diagram already. Okay, so it's transferred over to it, but that was for the manufacturing side. So let's say we want to add processes outside of manufacturing, right? Maybe we need to order material and receive it and ship the parts out, and then maybe inspect the parts, right? So we can add other processes here in non-manufacturing other than just manufacturing operations. So we'll select those, and that auto-populates in our process flow, excuse me. We can see order material. Now we just put them in order, make sure they're in the right order. And we can easily select and change these, move them around. The symbols are automatically populated, and I can show you where those come from as well. Okay. If we have time anyway, but let's say we're going to inspect it before we ship it. Okay, so we're going to set that, and this is the process that we have, and our process flow is effectively complete. All right. So let's go back to our index. And now is kind of the moment of truth. We're going to build our control plan in 2 minutes or less. That's the whole point of this Spotlight webinar. So we built all this information into the inspection plan, into high QA, either by the defaults that we set up or by changing them individually. Okay. In fact, I didn't change one individual. I'm going to go back to that just to let you know I'm not trying to pull the wool over your eyes or anything. Let's say for, I don't know, this diameter. Okay, we had that set up at 1 per 20. Let's say we want it at, 2 per hour, something along those lines. Great. Now we have that sampling rate set up at 2 per hour. So you can change them individually. All right. Additionally, something I almost forgot was our critical characteristic. So let's say, for example, this dimension, could be any dimension. Let's pick a different one. It seems like I always pick that one. Let's pick this dimension. Dimension number 8. Let's say, oh, this is set up for a caliper, but let's say this is an important dimension and we need to measure it all the time. Okay, great. Let's say it's a CTQ or critical, KPC, SC. There's so many different acronyms for criticality. Let's say this is a CTQ. I'm going to hit save here. Now, once I hit save, a few different things happen. Okay, we have a gauge category set up. You can see that, and that's the same as what we talked about already. But we also have a designator column in the bill of characteristics where we can identify and sort out by those CTQs. We have a little sort icon here, so we have the ability to be able to sort if you'd like to. But we have a rule, at least I have a rule in my system here that says, okay, if it's a CTQ, automatically update my sampling rate to be based on an AQL table instead of whatever the default was. So the idea here isn't that, oh, it has to be an AQL table or whatever. The idea here is you can make rules in this system that if this action happens, then make that action happen. Because that's amazing for consistency to where you don't, oh, I got to remember to go change that. I got to remember to change that in the control plan. Oh, and I got to make that consistent with what's on the process flow diagram. So you can have all of that documentation consistent because the computer's automatically defaulting to it. Just as a little creature comfort, we also have it to where change the symbol so you can have that as well. Sometimes that's just a very nice identifier. Okay, so we changed that. We changed one manually for the sampling rate. Now let's go build our control plan and see what that looks like. Excuse me. So we have our process flow. Here's our control plan. Now we're going to build this. We're going to say create PQP document. Now here's our control plan. Just some information on it and what it all contains. Now here's a very important aspect of it. All right. A lot of, at least when I was in automotive a lot, and some medical. However, we get maybe written up every once in a while, or it was a finding that the documentation didn't match, right? Your PFMEA didn't match your process flow, didn't match your control plan. You would change one and then it forgot to change something else, something along those lines. That actually can't happen in our software, okay? Because if you look right here, this is like the serial number of the process flow. And this will be serialized in your system as well. And if we look right here, we see that's the same serial number. So those two documents are going to be interlinked and they're sharing information. All right, so you can't have one be different than the other. It's very important. Okay, now we're going to talk about workflows just a little bit. So workflow can be anything you want it to be. Okay, I know that's very generic. However, this document workflow is set up to where it's drafted by this person, this goes to this person for a signature. So you see 4 different potential workflows here. These are just defaults. You could have 400 here, okay? The workflows in high QA are completely configurable to whatever you want them to be. Maybe you want the inspector to fill it out in the draft state, and then it goes to the quality engineer for an approval, and then for digital approval, and then the quality manager for an approval, and then the plant manager for a sign off. Sure, whatever you want that to be. You could have as many here as you want, and for different forms, for different signatures, whatever. Also note that these are titles for people and not actual people, because in that next step, now we're going to assign specific people to this workflow. Okay, maybe Joe or Tim can fill this out. And then we're going to have Scott, be the procurement manager who's going to sign off on it. Okay. Now, this is actually a really cool function. So we can have different forms and different templates in here. Maybe you have a customer specific template that you need for your submission package, right? Now, this is set up for the control plan, so it probably wouldn't be different. But keep in mind, this is the same for any type of submission information, like your FAI, SPC chart, whatever else. If the customer has a specific form, you can include it in here, just like in the flow, the workflow, and have it show up. Okay, so it's very neat. We're just going to say next and complete. Now our control plan is going to be automatically built for us. There's our control plan. It's all done. So hopefully that was 2 minutes or less. I didn't talk too much to actually build it, because if you look, it's built on pre-existing information. This and these 2 columns came over from the process flow diagram where we identified the processes, right? Here's the balloon numbers that we got when we clicked on the button and said auto balloon. The type was identified from the auto ballooning as well, so that was automatically done. The requirements were automatically brought in. Measurement technique, sampling frequency. Please note that our roughing operation right here that we identified, the specifications are different because we modified those, right? We said those were contracer and those are 100% lot size. However, for the rest of them, like here's dimension 4, right? And that's 0.52 in contracer, but here's dimension 4 and it's linear 0.5 caliper because that was on the finished part, not on the specific operation. So as you build things along the way, they're automatically generated and populated in here. And I mentioned that your data can't be different. For example, I can't change this. I'm typing on the keyboard right now. I can't change that because it's linked to the source data. You would have to change the source data in the bill of characteristics in order for this to update here. And also, if anything changes on your process flow, it will automatically give you a big red error here, that not error, but a message that says, hey, your process flow has changed. You'd better update this because something's discrepant. So all that information is tied together. Okay. So that's our control plan in 2 minutes. It took us a half an hour to explain it, but that's our control plan. So thank you very much for your time. We have a couple questions. Lisa, did we have a couple questions come in, I think?
We do indeed. And as Tim mentioned, at this time, we'll go ahead and take those questions. We invite you to ask questions. There is a little Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen there. Go ahead and type those in there. Okay, let's take a look. The first question that came in says, can you show the AS9145 index of PPAP deliverables?
Oh, sure. Oh, that's a great question. So the AS9145, let's, want to get this stupid thing out of my way. I'm sorry, I'm arguing with Zoom right now. I'm pulling this down so I can actually get to my menu system up here. So we'll take another kind of peek into the back office, right? So just like before, those are set up in our components. So this is kind of like don't pay attention to the man behind the curtain, right? So we're actually looking behind the curtain right now. So these are the components that would be set up. So you see our system components here, and we have our indexes here. So we had it set up for a level 4 index for Acme tool. Well, these are the components that were comprised in there, right, that you saw. Well, you can set up any index you want here, as many as you want. Here's the AS9145 you were requesting. This was set up for the AS9145. However, this is completely configurable. If you have a customer specific, let's say for the 9145, let's say Boeing wants a specific form on their specific format. Sure, great. Let's build a unique index for that and put their specific form in it. That way, when you select it out of your part category, all that information is already there and will already populate to it. So great question. And you can have, again, as many as you want here. You could have 100 here if you needed to. But yeah, you can completely configure them for whatever index that you need. Okay. Hope that answered your question.
Okay, great. The same gentleman, Stephen, is asking another question. It says, if more than one person is working with the tool, could a change in, say, a PDF overwrite work another is doing in a PFMEA?
Okay, so it's not I think it said PDF.
Yeah.
PFD, no.
Oh.
PFD.
Oh, PFD. Oh, sorry, PFD.
The process flow, changing the process flow diagram. Yeah.
Thank you, FD.
Okay. So when you change the process flow diagram, here, let's do that. Let's actually do it. Let's play around with it a little bit. So process flow diagram. Let's say we had a, we're going to add, let's say add an operation. Let's do that. Let's go into manufacturing operations. That'll be fun. Well, fun for me. Hopefully it's fun for everybody. So let's just grab some more dimensions here and we'll say add operation. Okay, and then we'll tie it to a process. Let's say, I don't know, finish, sure. So whatever process it is, then when we go to our PQP, we're going to go back into our process flow diagram. And we're going to say sync processes right now. So that's also going to tell it, go back to my manufacturing operations, look for any changes, and then bring those changes in. And you can see here's the finish operation. And if that's where we want it, great. We wouldn't have a receive up here, we'd have that up here. But anyway, let's say the finish is going to be right here. Hit apply changes, that's all done, no problem. So our process flow has been updated and it's changed. Now when we go back to our control plan, it's going to give us an error that says, wait a minute, the process flow has been changed. You need to synchronize your processes. So we say sync processes and dimensions. And what happens is we go down and here is the finished. So I selected a whole bunch of dimensions, right? Here's all the dimensions I selected in the manufacturing operations that were automatically brought over and populated into our control plan just from adding it in the operation level, right? So now we go up and hit apply changes. Yes, confirming. And if we were to remove one, it would have shown up as red saying, hey, these are being removed. But now that has been added to our control plan. Okay. Great question.
If I may add, team, all of those changes are fully documented in a clear audit trail and log, who did, when, why. You can create also different revisions of this, of the control plan and so forth.
Okay, any other questions, Lisa?
Yes, there's another question. It says, what is the security for this tool? Can we use this on restricted military projects, for example?
Yeah, we actually have several customers using in that. So this is, we can install it a couple different ways. In that instance, usually how customers want to install it is an on-premises solution. So it is a database solution. It's a SQL server that's installed on-prem in your ITAR database. So usually there's two different databases or servers that customers will have internally, like one for ITAR, one for non-ITAR and security. So this is literally locked into your system. Anything that communicates with it is internal to you, and your IT has complete control and access for everything that's done. In fact, scrolling down a little bit here, we can even set up different user accounts to where they only have specific roles in the system and only have access to certain areas and can change certain things. Okay, so not only is your data controlled and secured in your system, but also you can limit access even to that data for certain users. Okay.
Yeah, we are already working with military facilities, Army, and ITAR and other sensitive type of manufacturers, and we are already vetted on FIPS, DFARS, ITAR, and the correct or the requested level of, at this time, of CMM, or the CMM, forgot the acronym, but of the cybersecurity aspects as well.
Great. And I should, yes, and I will take the time to introduce, that's actually Effie Torenberg. He is our president of HiQA. So thank you, Effie, for sharing that. Okay, we have one other question. We'll go ahead, and we are past the time here, but let's just conclude with this last question. It says, will this populate a PFMEA or just a control plan?
Oh, it'll actually do a PFMEA too. So this was focused on control plans. We did do a spotlight webinar on PFMEAs, but if I could belabor you for just about 2 minutes, again, everything's 2 minutes, right? We can build a process flow, or excuse me, a PFMEA in less than 2 minutes. Link to that same process flow, right? Same idea with the workflows, build your workflows, build the people associated. You can actually do that later as well. What template you want to use for the PFMEA, just where it goes, and then hit complete. And what it does is it takes those processes that we identified in the manufacturing operations, and then we have the failure modes populated in a library in the database. So that what happens is we just build a PFMEA in less than a minute, right? And it's all synchronized to your templatized information in your database, which is also secured, right? So if it happens to be any automotive people, Ford came out with a new requirement that said your PFMEA, your failure mode, your process flow, things like that, need to come from a controlled environment. We support that already because in manufacturing, if we look in the process library, this is the library where all of your information is retained and secured. For example, in our drilling process, we said it's going to bring in a fabrication step. Any other information would have been populated. But here's the failure modes for this drilling process. So when we identified it as a drilling process in the manufacturing operations, when we said, okay, now we're going to create our PFMEA, it went to the library here, looked at this drilling process, saw if it had any failure modes, and automatically populated our PFMEA from the information in our library. So we can do that as well. Yeah, it's pretty exciting. But great question. Thank you so much for it.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Tim, for sharing your expertise. If you want to go ahead and advance to the last slide, we'll go ahead and put up our contact information. If any questions do come to mind following the session, feel free to reach out. If you would like to spend a little more time with us, we're happy to give you a personalized one-on-one demonstration. You can see there is a link at hiqa.com/schedule a demo. We invite you to do that. We also did record the session. I know it was brief, but I will be emailing this out in the next couple of days in case you would like to share it with your colleagues or watch the playback. Thanks so much, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day.